So welcome. We're glad you're here. My name is Eric White. I am the Adult Services Librarian here at the library. It is the day before Valentine's Day, and I just learned this morning it is also Galentine's Day. So happy Galentine's Day to those of you to whom it applies. Uh, as you may know, our February theme at the library is "Won't You Be My Neighbor?" And in honor of that, and in and in his blah, and in anticipation of Valentine's Day, and in partnership with Macdonald Book Shop, we are excited to have author Ellen O'Clover here at the library in conversation with fellow author Thea Weiss to discuss Ellen's debut adult novel, The Heartbreak Hotel, set right here in Estes Park. Before we do formal introductions, I'll give my usual disclaimer, which is that the library brings in speakers to share their perspectives for the enrichment of our community, and speakers' perspectives are purely their own. All right, now I would like to introduce our authors. Ellen O'Clover writes stories about love, identity, and belonging for both teens and adults. Her debut adult novel, The Heartbreak Hotel, was a Book of the Month selection and a regional indie bestseller. Her debut YA novel, 7% of Roe Devereaux, was named a Best Book of the Year by the Bank Street Center for Children's Education and a finalist for multiple states' book awards. Ellen lives near Boulder, Colorado, with her rocket scientist husband and two perfect bulldogs. Thea Weiss started writing in the back of a Chicago steakhouse, writing napkin puppet shows for anyone on a break. Her love of storytelling stuck, and she's been a copywriter and scriptwriter for the last 10 years. Her book, The Second Chance Cinema, was an October 2025 Book of the Month selection. All right, and before I officially kick things off, let me just switch the camera and switch the microphones. So give me 1 second to do that. Please welcome Ellen O'Clover and Thea Weiss.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having us.
To be here.
Yeah, Thea and I actually met because, as you heard in our bios, we were both Book of the Month selections this year. And if you don't know what Book of the Month is, it's like the oldest book club, I think.
Yeah, I was amazed by it. Yeah.
It's been around since like the 20s. And they put out like 5 to 7 titles every month that are kind of curated for their subscribers. And so I had already picked Thea's book as my October selection and then saw that she was also a Colorado author. And so I reached out to her and we've been hanging out ever since.
Yeah.
So I'm really thrilled that she's here with me tonight. And her book is exceptional, so you should get it.
Thank you. Speaking of exceptional books, The Heartbreak Hotel is just dazzling. I have seen so many readers buzzing about Henry and Lou. I know that it's a story about healing, and not to be cheesy, but it really has healed parts of me. And I did see one reviewer say that they felt very deeply cared for by your writing. And I thought that was such a perfect way of putting it. So can you tell folks a little about the story and yourself?
Yeah. So if you haven't read it yet or don't know what it's about, The Heartbreak Hotel is a love story about a therapist who opens a bed and breakfast for the brokenhearted right here in Estes Park, and her landlord, who hates that she's doing this in his house because he has a hidden heartbreak of his own. So while it is a romance, it also grapples with a lot of like heavier things like heartbreak and grief. And is set here in Estes Park, which I think is one of the most magical places on earth. And I'm sure you all agree. Can you tell us about your book too before we get into the
Sure. I wrote The Second Chance Cinema. It is about an engaged couple who discovers a cinema that plays an unusual form of entertainment, which is their own memories. So they're getting married soon, and there are a lot of things that they have not told each other yet that tensions arise.
It's so good. And it's not a romance, but there is romance in it. So if you're in the mood for love stories right now in this season, definitely pick it up.
Yes. So speaking of Estes and how magical it is, how did you decide to set the Heartbreak Hotel here?
So my husband and I moved to Colorado in 2017. We'd been living in Chicago, which is another thing that Thea and I have in common. We both lived in Chicago for a while. And we moved out here. Estes Park was kind of one of the first places that we explored in the mountains because we wanted to go to Rocky Mountain National Park. We were hiking a lot. We were trying to make the most of our new, home. And it was like from the first time I came to Estes, it was like, oh, this place is really special. And I often make up settings for my books. I have two young adult novels that came out before the Heartbreak Hotel, and they both have some fictional towns in them because sometimes when you're writing, you just like for it to be the exact setting that you want it to be to serve the story, you just have to make it up. But for this book, I wanted to write a book about healing from heartbreak and like the places that make us feel really held and cared for. And to me, that already existed and it was here. My parents moved to Colorado in 2019, a couple years after we did, and they live in Estes Park. And so we spend a lot of holidays up here. We're always visiting. And I feel like when I, come down that hill from 36, like into town, and there's like the lake on both sides, and it's just like I feel my blood pressure just like going down. I just love being here so much. And so when I was thinking about this story, it was like, okay, well, I don't need to actually make up a place for this. I've already got one. And it's been really cool to put a book out with a real life setting because people really resonate with it. Like I was doing an event last week and this woman came up to me in the signing line and she was like, I'm getting married in Estes Park in 3 months. Like people have really dear memories of being here, whether it's like they got married here, they got engaged here, they did a girls' trip here. Like I hear that all the time. And so that's kind of the first time in my career too that I've set a book somewhere that people, have really deep feelings about, which is very special.
That's wonderful. I could feel the charm the moment I was driving in on that same route you
Totally.
described.
Yeah. Was this your first visit to Estes Park this weekend?
This, no, I've been before, but never at this time of day with all the twinkly lights on and what a dream. I want to stay.
Yeah.
I'm checking in.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect.
Which version, so what are the things you chose to fictionalize from
Mm.
Estes and which ones did you make up and how did you go about that process?
Yeah. A lot of the specific businesses, I think maybe all of them that are in the book are made up because I want it to feel really timeless. And also, um, there's still the element of needing to create the exact setting that you want. So there's like a ice cream shop in the book called Pollywogs that's sort of like out by the mountains, which doesn't really exist. So I put that there in the book. Um, and I've made up, some street names and things like that just so that the book feels like even though it's grounded in a real place, you're still escaping into a world that is maybe not exactly like this one. And I think that that just helped me like ground the story, but also make it serve the purpose that I still needed it to serve. And also, you never want to like put something in a book that would maybe go out of business and then people read it in 10 years and they want to go find that place and it's no longer there. So you're always just kind of like thinking about that kind of stuff when you are writing a story too. But for me, it's like the vibe and the feeling of Estes Park is like pure nonfiction in this book. Like that's all real. And then the specific proper nouns, like the name of the ice cream store, those are made up.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to go to Pollywogs.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
If Lou were to create like a welcome guide to the comeback in, are there any spots in Estes that you think would go in there that are real places?
That's such a fun question. So Louisa is the proprietor of this Heartbreak Hotel. She's the female main character. And she is not much of a hiker herself, which is a point of contention in the book because people are like, well, this is a bed and breakfast in Estes Park. You should be able to recommend all these hikes to me. And she's like, well, I'm kind of an indoor cat. I love hiking. But for Lou, I think she would probably recommend like a nice walk around Lake Estes because that's the way to get outside and enjoy it without having to go hiking. Um, I think that she would recommend walking along Main Street and doing some shopping. I think that she would recommend Kind Coffee, which has a really nice feeling, and maybe then walking along the river through town afterwards.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I have my itinerary.
I recommend all those things too.
Yeah, that's great. So this is a romance, but it tackles so many themes, loss, healing, found family. How did you go about balancing those elements with the romance in the story?
Yeah, I love a romance that feels escapist. I think that's what a lot of people love about the genre, but also that tackles real life issues because, the reality is when you're having a love story, you don't get to only be having a wonderful, magical love story. You have the whole rest of your life that's also happening alongside that, and you're dealing with other things. And so I always try to make sure that my romances have other things going on besides the central love story. And in terms of like writing about heavier topics within romance, I think one of the like superpowers of romance is that you go in knowing everything will be okay. That's the promise of the genre, is that they're going to be together at the end. And so it's sort of this like safe vessel to explore heavier things because you have that assurance that it will work out. And even if it's not happily ever after, it's happily for now. And your characters are going to make it through, even if they're tackling something really tough. So I recently did a podcast about grief, and it was with these two therapists who are grief counselors. And they were talking about how important they feel like it is for fiction and especially genres like romance to tackle things like grief because someone who is going through like a really severe loss might not pick up a nonfiction book about how to process grief, but they might pick up a romance novel wanting to escape, and then it's like this safe way to maybe confront those feelings that are so hard to process and confront. And so I think that's one of the strengths of fiction in general, but especially romance.
Definitely agree. Love that. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the different types of heartbreak in this book? Because we definitely see a few different kinds. Your minor characters that stay at the comeback inn, which is Lou's business in the book, are all so strong and shape her journey in such an interesting way. So I'd love to hear a little about like the different types of heartbreak.
Yeah, so one of the most fun parts of writing this book was coming up with that cast of characters who would be coming through the bed and breakfast because it takes a very specific kind of person to have experienced an immense loss. And their first thought is, I'm going to go be with a bunch of strangers in a house and talk about it with them. And so in writing a book about heartbreak, I really wanted to explore lots of different ways into that, like breakups, of course, divorce, but also grief. And then the really like specific and complicated form of heartbreak that is watching someone you really care about struggle with a mental illness that you can't fix for them. One of the main plot threads in this story is Louisa, the main character's relationship with her sister and her mother, who has a really severe mental illness, and she and her sister have kind of grown up reacting in opposite ways to that. And they have to tackle their relationship with their mom in the book and like the really intense heartbreak that they've both felt because of her actions over their life, and also the heartbreak that they've experienced at each other's hands because of their different reactions to their mom. And so that was really important to me to get in there too, so that anyone picking up this book, maybe you're not going through a breakup, but we've all, struggled with relationships with family or friends or grief and, that very real loss. And so this book kind of looks at all of it. And I think the point of this story and kind of what Louisa comes to learn too is that we don't have to be going through the same hardships to be able to be there for each other and support each other. It's like not really having to understand the exact experience. It's just multiple people who are in pain and can show up for each other in that moment, even if they don't know the exact feeling or the exact form of loss that someone else has had. It's just like the fact of being in it together is so strong and powerful.
That's beautiful. And the connections they make at the comeback in, it's just
the friendships in the house were so fun to write. Yeah,
that comes through. They're fun to read.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, just an off the wall, silly question. If you were to open the Oak Clover Inn,
ooh, such a nice name.
Where would it be set? What would you put on the activity list for the day? And what would you serve as the food? Because I know Lou talks a lot about the food in the book and how she can't.
Yeah. Oh, I love that question. I feel like I can't say Estes Park, so I'll push myself to say something else. I took a trip last year to the UK and I stayed at this bed and breakfast near Bath. That was so beautiful and amazing and sort of life-changing to like just be there and experience like the tranquility of this place. So maybe like in the Cotswolds, like in the English countryside, that seems really dreamy. I would love to do that. Food-wise, I feel like if you're in the English countryside, it's got to be like scones and clotted cream and jam. And that's kind of easy. I think I could figure that out.
Like to wake up.
Yeah. And then for activities, like a long walk on the moors, like the writers of old walking through the fields and the farm animals would be really soothing. reading in a
Yeah.
beautiful room with a fireplace in it. That's like my idea of a healing time.
Sounds healing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see. So Henry and Lou are our main couple, and since it's Valentine's Day, what do you think their perfect date night would be?
So Louise is a therapist. Henry is a veterinarian and also a landlord. He owns this house. And I think one of the themes of this book and in my life is like the healing power of being with animals. And so I think maybe a fun date for them would be like volunteering at a dog shelter for the afternoon, being with the animals there, taking care of them, giving back a little. They're both very gregarious and giving people. And then Henry's a really good chef, unlike Louisa. So maybe he would make her dinner after.
That's sweet. I like that.
Perfect day.
And sticking with the Valentine's theme, you touched on this earlier, but is there anything you would add to what drew you to romance?
Yeah. So in addition to what I said about it kind of being this safe place, and I think, right now, especially the world feels really, really tough and there's hardship going on and that we're watching our neighbors and our communities go through. And I think romance is one of the few things in life that you pick up and there's like a guaranteed happy ending. Like you're like, oh, this is gonna work out. I know it for sure. Which is no small thing, especially now. So there's a lot of value in that. But I think for me, the biggest thing about romance is that when I'm reading or watching a show or listening to music, it's like I'm always looking to have that moment of emotional connection where like I'm experiencing something from a piece of art that it's like a feeling that maybe I thought I was alone in, but now it's being reflected back at me from a piece of art that a stranger made. And it's like that connection where you're like, oh my gosh, like we're also connected in this human experience. And that moment of like emotional clarity is what I'm always looking for in experiencing art. And it's always felt to me like romance is a little bit of a shortcut to that because the most vulnerable and brave thing we can do is fall in love and like open ourselves up to that heartache and that incredible feeling. And so anytime I read a romance, it's like I know I'm going to get into those vulnerable feelings. I know we're going to cut to the core of that like emotional soup that I love so much. So I think that draws me to it also.
Emotional soup.
Emotional soup.
I'm saving that one.
Why do you write speculative fiction? Like what draws you to like the magical element that's in the second chance cinema?
Yeah, I'm really drawn to a realistic world with kind of one element that is not of this world. And I've found it's a fun way to access some of those themes that for me always felt like a little on the nose if I wrote about it. And I don't know, I can write about loss and the different versions of ourselves in a way that feels kind of whimsical and lighter.
Yeah, I love that. And there is romance in the second chance cinema.
Yeah.
So how did you sort of balance that like human relationship development alongside the really high concept plot of this magical cinema that shows people their own memories?
It's interesting. Yeah, I kind of thought of the concept first, but I also thought about my husband and I and the versions of ourselves we might see in that kind of setting and the ticking clock of a wedding approaching and needing to know the person you're going to end up with seemed important.
So good.
But it's definitely different than the typical romance because it's kind of like what happens after the happily ever after.
Right.
Real.
Like the big engagement happy moment has happened and now we're finding out all these things about each other.
A mess.
But yeah. Which is also so human and true and like beautiful in its own way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What made so you started out in YA. What made you switch the path to adult romance?
Yeah. So when I first started writing books, it was like never a question to me that I would start with young adult fiction, which is sort of like 12 to 18 is kind of the usual age range. I just think like those were the books that made me want to become a writer. Like that was the age that I was when I felt like I really started like imprinting on stories. Like I read something and it was like everything to me. And I think it's such a privilege to write for young people because when you're that age, like your feelings are just right here. They're like so big. And the stories that we read when we're young, not that stories I read now don't also imprint on me, they really do. But there's just something about that age and how big your feelings are. And I love writing it, and I hope that I will get to keep doing it. But my YA books are not romances. They do have romance in them. And I always found myself sort of looking forward to writing that part the most. It was like the part I was always looking forward to. I was really excited to write it. And so I was like, what if I just let myself like really lean in on that and just give it a try? And so I got the idea for the Heartbreak Hotel, and I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna try it and see what happens. And it's been really fun to switch genres, but I hope to keep doing both. So never say never.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of, you're so right that during that period, those are the stories that kind of shape who we are and how we see the
Totally.
world. Are there any books, movies, other inspiration that shaped your writing process that you think folks should check out?
So many. I mean, I think that's the amazing thing about art is that it's like all talking to each other and it's all informing each other. And it's like everything that we make is sort of an amalgamation of everything we've been inspired by from other people's art.
Absolutely.
It's like the coolest thing. When I was a teenager, it was definitely Sarah Dessen. I don't know if you read her growing up or if anyone in the room is familiar, but she was sort of like, to me, the it girl of books when I was in high school. She was writing, just these stories about girls my age growing up in families like mine and experiencing life. There's sort of these quiet, like slice of life stories that just made me feel so seen, and those really inspired me, especially in my YA writing. I'm trying to think of like recent things I've really loved. I read, probably a lot of people in the room know this one, The Wedding People. Alison Estes came out last year or the year before. Fantastic. And I think just like such a good example of how to write about something really hard in a way that has so much humor and hope still in it. So like I can't recommend that book more highly. And then in romance, I really love Tara DeWitt. I don't know if you've read, I think I was talking about her with you the other day because I just love her stuff. It's like very emotionally resonant. She has this way of like really cutting to the quick of like the human experience that I really appreciate. But there are so many. I mean, I could talk about it all night. How about you? Have you read anything lately that you just loved?
I've been reading books from like fellow authors.
Yeah.
Haven't come out yet.
I know. That's one of the magical things about like once you get into this career, then you start, they're called advanced reader copies. So it's like we're always reading books that don't come out for 6 to 8 months. And then I do these events and people are like, what have you read recently? And I'm like, oh, well, there's this one, but you can't buy it for a year. And there's this one and you can't read it until the fall, so.
I did just read Heart the Lover, and it was
Lily King.
life-changing.
Yes, I've heard so many good things about that one.
Really good. The path to publication is kind of mysterious. I'm a debut, so when I was starting like Googling things, how does this work? What was that path like for you?
Yeah, it's so different for everyone. So I want to hear your answer to this after too. For me, it was really long, and kind of like this. I said earlier we moved here in 2017, and we moved for my husband's job, and we didn't know anyone here. Like, did not have a single friend or contact, and so I found myself in this situation where I had all this time on my hands because we didn't have a community out here yet. And I was like, okay, I should do it. I should write the book. I studied creative writing in college. It was like always my dream, but you graduate and you get kind of caught up in like trying to get your career off the ground and figuring out how to be an adult in the world and pay your rent and all this stuff. But now I had all this time. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write a book. And if you want to traditionally publish with one of like the big 5 publishers like Penguin Random House or HarperCollins, you have to have what's called a literary agent. They don't accept unagented submissions. So it's like the first step of the whole process is getting an agent. And that's basically just like sending out your manuscript and hoping someone will take a chance on you. Lots of rejection baked in. And then when you get an agent, then they basically repeat that process and send your book to editors. And there's a lot of rejection baked into that. It's like every phase takes a very long time and you hear no a lot. And so I wrote that first book I think I finished it in 2018. I signed with an agent. That book did not sell to a publisher, so I wrote another one. I was feeling like my agent and I weren't a great fit at that point, so we parted ways. I wrote another book. I got another agent. That book also did not sell to a publisher. Then I wrote a third book and I kept my same agent because that was going well. And that book did sell. And that was my first YA novel with HarperCollins. And then I had a second YA with Harper and then made this pivot over to adult. And so I think it was like from the time that I started really seriously writing to when my first YA book came out, it was like 5 years, which felt incredibly long to me. And some people work at it way longer than that before they get published. So there's really no normal. I think the one constant is that like none of us get out unscathed by the no's and the rejection. Like it happens at some point in the process.
Part of the process.
Yeah.
People say it's cliche because it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you? Because you were screenwriting for a while before you got
Yeah, my book was kind of a bad screenplay. I shouldn't say it was bad, but it needed a lot of love. And in 2020, I just was like, this is it's the same feeling as you. This is the time. I'm gonna write a book. And I looked at everything I'd already written as a screenplay because that seems like a great outline. And it certainly was. Wrote the book, and at the end of my maternity leave, for some reason, I decided that would be the moment to query agents, which was just a strange choice, but
There's no good time.
logical, it worked out. And yeah, then it was, I guess, very similar to your path from there. But there's a lot of waiting, a lot of no's, and I feel like when you're waiting, the time just expands.
Gosh, yeah. We were just talking about that before we sat down up here, that the hardest part of publishing is all the waiting. It's like waiting to hear from your editor with edits, waiting to hear if your next book is going to get picked up. Like there's always something you're kind of waiting to see if it's going to happen or not. Yeah. And you're right. The time just like bleeds out while you're waiting. It feels like it's forever.
Is there anything you would share about your writing process or kind of general writing tips that you found valuable?
So there's kind of like these terms in publishing that you're either a pantser or a plotter. So like you either really heavily plot your books before you write them, or you fly by the seat of your pants as you go. And I used to be a real pantser, but now that I'm always writing on a deadline, I'm very committed to my outlines. So I'm really methodical about like I have, bullet points of what's going to happen in every single chapter because that just gives me no out. It's like when I sit down, I know what needs to happen in this book today. Like I don't have an excuse not to write it. And I know that if I follow my outline, eventually I will hit my deadline. So how about you?
Also a former pantser.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's too hard when you're like, I don't have time to
It just takes too long. It takes too long to wander through it, although it's very fun.
Yes. I find I have to spend the first part of the day writing as much as I can, and then I go back and make it, make sense.
Totally. Yeah. I always say like the only thing that a first draft needs to be is done. Like it just has to be written because you will, and you should go back and edit it. But if you're being perfectionist about it, like it's never going to get written.
Speaking of writing and projects and waiting for exciting things, can you talk about your next project on deck?
Yes. So I have another adult romance novel coming out this fall. It's called If Not You, and it is a rivals to lovers romance about two copywriters who work in advertising. They have a very contentious history, and they find themselves stuck on this month-long work trip together when their agencies are pitted against each other to compete to win the business of a luxury resort brand. So it's sort of like an armchair travel book. They're traveling to all these like luxurious five-star resorts and also competing and also falling in love, of course. How about you? What are you working on now?
My second book is about a charming mountain town where
we love that here.
where folks are born knowing when the best day of their life will take place, but we follow a lead who is one of the only people in town who does not have a best day assignment. It's kind of about fate and is it better to plan out your life or live a spontaneous life?
That. So good.
Yeah, I think at this point we can open up for audience questions.
Sure, and actually, I got my mic working.
Yay.
So, with that, I will call on in-person attendees, and I'll alternate with our online audience. In-person friends, please wait for me to get to you with the mic before saying your questions. Otherwise, you might need to repeat it. And when speaking into the mic, just hold it nice and close. And then online folks, as a reminder, you can put your questions in the chat. So who has got a question? All right.
So I'm wondering in the Heartbreak Hotel, did you do a lot of research on the emotional part?
Yes, great question. So there's this thing in publishing called a sensitivity reader, which is basically an editor that you can hire, but only to read for like one specific thing. So I hired a sensitivity reader who is a therapist to read this book for me and make sure that I was getting that right. Like Louisa is in the process of getting her license in this book, and so I wanted to make sure that I was portraying that correctly. But also, I mentioned earlier, there's this big plot point about her mother who has borderline personality disorder and how she and her sister have sort of grown up in reaction to that. And so, this therapist that I work with specializes in working with clients who have borderline personality disorder. And so, she was really helpful in just making sure that I was, one, portraying that correctly, but also generously, not ever villainizing her mom because she's not a villain. She's just a human who's going through something really hard. And so that was like the biggest research I had to do for this book, was just making sure that all of that was being portrayed accurately and generously, like I said. Yeah. Not so much research about the setting since I'm here all the time, which was nice.
Other questions? Let me see if we get any questions from online. Not yet. Any questions from this side of the room?
Come on, be brave.
Okay, so I was kind of interested when you were talking about process because I dabble a little bit in
Amazing.
writing.
Okay.
And I'm definitely more of the pantser.
Yep.
But the idea of the outline, which I understand, but I've also run into times where my characters will suddenly just do something that
Oh,
I
yeah.
did not expect. And
Yes.
how do you sort of deal with that when you're sort of also following the outline?
Great question. My characters are also always running away from me and making their own decisions. I think that's normal and good, honestly. Like I always talk about how writing is like half, it feels to me like it's half putting my butt in the chair and doing the work, and it's half just like staying open to whatever's gonna come, which sounds really woo-woo, but it's like part of it really does feel like these characters are real people and they're telling me their story, and I just have to be open to receiving it. And so the outline for me is like more of a safety net. Like it's like if I sit down and I feel like I'm having writer's block, I can go look at my outline and be like, okay, I know what needs to happen. But if my characters start telling me what they want to do, I always try to honor that, at least for a while. If it starts going off the rails, you can always edit it later. But I'm like, okay, there's a reason I'm having this thought. There's a reason like the characters are wanting to do this now. And it's usually because I've built something in that I wasn't really aware I was doing. And then my characters are telling me what the payoff's supposed to be. So it's kind of like trying to honor both things, like making sure that the plot structure is what it's supposed to be based on what I know from my outline, but also leaving room for that creativity. And I feel like that's, for me, been like the joy of an outline, is that I used to be so worried that if I was really religious about my outlining, it would take all the creativity out of the process. But I find that it really opens me up to be more creative because I don't have to worry about if I'm hitting the beats of my plot right. I know I am. And so I can just worry about what are my characters doing in this scene and how are the emotions coming through. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. And I find that if something feels a little off to me, it's often my character wants to do something else. They don't want to do this. But I did find myself early in this second book, because it's only my second book, a little like glued to the outline. And now that I've given myself space to break away from it a bit, it's really helped.
Yeah.
Oh, she wants to do this here.
Yeah, totally. Did that answer your question?
Other questions? Oh, we got one from online. All right. A question about the Second Chance Cinema. Is the couple in the book watching the movie of their pasts together?
Yes.
So juicy.
Yeah, so they are watching their core memories, basically the things that shaped who they are and what they are bringing into the relationship. So a ticket boy at the beginning tells them, you have 10 tickets worth of memories. They're 2-hour blocks that play in this private theater, but they are watching their lives together. So the first film that plays is Babies, which is the first thing they see. Like, what are we seeing? Is this a home video? And it progresses up until the time that they met. And as it goes on, there are definitely a lot more tensions when they get closer to the time that they met.
Right. At first, it's sort of this like, oh my gosh, how amazing that I get to experience you at
Yes,
how one age where I didn't get to know you. And then it's like gets further and further like, oh, you never told me that.
Yeah. Didn't we talk?
How did you choose? Sorry, I'm going off the rails. How did you choose what memories to like? How did you
So
pick those 10
hard.
things?
Yeah, it was so hard.
Yeah.
It had to be things that felt really um, like there was a balance on both sides
Mhm.
where the memory kind of felt like a similar story for both of them.
Yeah.
I wanted to hit a lot of different chapters of their lives. But I don't know, I scrapped so many memories.
Really? I'd love
Yeah,
to see the ones that didn't
chapters,
make it
yeah.
Right. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, we have one right here.
Oh, nice. All right.
Yeah.
But the internet won't hear you.
How long have your characters been together in the second cinema?
How long have they been together?
Yes.
It's been 2.5 years when we meet them. Yeah. So a while, but they do.
You would think.
You would think. Dun dun dun.
What else? All right. Going once, going twice. Okay. Right. Well. Let's give Thea and Ellen a hand. And let me close with a few thank yous. 1 second. All right. Once again, Ellen and Thea, thank you for making the drive up to join us. I want to thank all of you for joining us and bringing your questions. I want to thank Macdonald Book Shop. I want to thank Nicole especially for bringing me the idea for helping get this talk together. I think Ellen reached out to Nicole, and then Nicole reached out to me. I
Team
appreciate
effort.
it. Team effort, yes. I want to thank the Friends of the Library Foundation for supporting everything we do here at the library. To everyone who registered, I will send a little email with links to books and a little survey. Love it if you could fill that out. Let us know what you thought of tonight's talk. And then finally, our partner, Macdonald Book Shop, has copies of both books for purchase, and Ellen and Thea will be here to sign copies. Thank you very much. Have a great evening, everyone.